Hello everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me today for a mental health and infertility conversation. Those of you who are bookish friends, thank you so much for tuning in. For anyone else who is here because of any of the tags, again, thank you so much for tuning in. This is going to be a conversation about my mental health. I have a few things that I want to discuss regarding my mental health and how everything's going at the moment. A big part of that is infertility, which is why that's what I've titled the video. If that's something that is hard for you, then feel free obviously to not watch. Totally understandable. I do have my computer sitting here with just a list of a few things that I wanted to touch base on today. Before I do talk about those things though, I just want to say that I am a white Australian. I do know that I am in a privileged position, and some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today, even those things like doing IVF and different things like that that have affected me, still mean that I'm actually quite privileged and that I have a privileged position from which I'm talking about these things. So in so much as you can be aware of your own privilege when it's a thing that you have, I'm aware of my privilege. I didn't want people to think that I was not aware of that, and that there are many things going on in the world that are far worse than what I'm going to be talking about today and my experiences, or that if people have the experiences I have, quite often it's on top of systemic racism or systemic poverty or systemic homophobia or all of those things combined, or systemic issues that have meant that they, in addition to all of these things, have tuberculosis or AIDS or something that in Western countries is curable but is not in a lot of the world, or treatable at least, that is not in a lot of the world. For example, right at the moment in Australia, the MS Readathon is happening, which is a readathon that happens in August in Australia, where we raise money for people who are living with MS. MS is a illness of the central nervous system, I think, the effects of which are just mind-bogglingly awful. As a person who has in the past worked with people with MS, I have seen how extreme and how difficult the effects of MS are. So even within a Western context, a white Western context, there are many things that could be going on in my life that are demonstrably worse than what I'm going to talk about. So I didn't want to make a video about my mental health without acknowledging that there are worse things going on in the world. I will link some things like the information about the MS Readathon. My friend Meredith from Reading with Merv is currently doing the MS Readathon, and she's been doing a bunch of different things over in her Discord to do with the MS Readathon. So I will link her channel down below, because I believe that you can sponsor her and raise money for the MS Readathon through her channel. But I'll link the MS Readathon info as well if you're in Australia and you want to join in next time, like I probably will. And I will link some other information about different ways that you can help out with different things that are going on in the world down below. So, having established all of that, like I said, the rest of this video is going to be me talking about my mental health currently and what's going on in my life and in my partner and myself's lives that is making my mental health not great, because that is the honest truth. My mental health is not great at the moment. My mental health has been not great for the last few months. So the things that I am going to touch on in regards to my mental health and how they are affected. First of all, generalised anxiety, infertility in particular, some things going on with one of our cats, Pistachio, my grandma who died recently, and my channel, which is definitely at the bottom of that list of things, but the way that my channel goes, it is tied into my mental health, particularly when there are lots of other things going on that is bringing my mental health down. I will just say, before I talk about those things in particular, I have made a few of these sorts of videos. I will link the playlist with all of the videos in the description below if you want to go and find out generally any more information about me and my mental health. In particular, I do have 2 videos that I've made specifically regarding my infertility and IVF journey. So if that's something that you want to learn more about, if you have done or currently are dealing with going through infertility and IVF or both, one or the other, etc., and you feel like that would help you, then those videos are in the playlist in the description. I make these videos because I feel like it helps me to process things, but also because some of the things, in particular the IVF and the infertility, is difficult to talk about in person. It's not something that I necessarily want to discuss with all of the people I know or I'm friends with, all of my family. I do talk about some of the different things with different people, so it's not to say that one-on-one conversations with friends or family aren't possible for me. I do have those with certain people, but not with everyone. It's not always that easy to broach the topic, to have a conversation. That is part of the reason why I make these videos as well, because it's a way of me sort of saying to the world and to specifically people who are in my life who maybe I don't feel comfortable or haven't spoken to about it, where I can say, if you want to know what's going on, here's a video. So that's another reason why I'm making this video today. So let's start with generalized anxiety. We will go down the list. Before I do that, I will just get my tea here. Still a bit hot. So yes, I have generalized anxiety. I do see a counsellor, so this is not the only way that I process things. If you are at all in a position to be able to seek counselling for any reason, I highly recommend. I have found my counsellor incredibly helpful. Speaking to her is incredibly helpful. I do also take medication, so again, if this would work for you, I would recommend, if you're in a position to be able to get access to medication for generalized anxiety, and I think that it definitely helps as well. But yes, I do live with generalized anxiety. It does mean that I am anxious a lot. I feel like I have a kind of level of anxiety that is always there, depending on how things are going in my other aspects of my life and how well things are going or how not well things are going. My generalized anxiety is, this is the thing that's always there. So when things aren't maybe going that well, when lots of things are happening that's making me anxious, then my anxiety will be quite heightened. As you'll see, some of you already know, some of you have been around for a little while, follow me on Twitter and various different places where I've talked about these things, but if you're here for the first time, you'll see as we go through and talk about these things, there are a bunch of things that have happened recently or are ongoing that have affected my anxiety. And yeah, like I said, it's quite high at the moment. So the anxiety affects me by, like I said, just a kind of low level of feeling anxious about things. But in particular, my anxiety affects me in terms of my relationships with other people. So when I'm quite anxious, I can tend to be sort of sensitive to different things that people say, find things upsetting or worrisome or hurtful where I maybe wouldn't have if I weren't in a heightened state of anxiety. And I do worry a lot about how I have affected other people and what my relationship with other people is and how they're feeling about me. It's a difficult one because obviously there are certain situations where maybe you have done the wrong thing, you've upset someone, you've said something stupid, whatever, and so your anxiety about a thing is warranted because you did do something that wasn't great or you said something that wasn't great. But the level to which I am going to be upset and think about it and overthink it is really high, particularly at the moment, is really, really high. And then, just taking regular things a little bit more personally, a little bit more upsettingly, thinking that someone's saying a thing because they're annoyed or upset or angry or whatever when they're not at all, or maybe it's just a passing comment. So that tends to be how my anxiety affects me. I do get stressed about sort of more regular things, like when I have work, if I don't feel prepared, or if I don't know the kids, or if I don't know the situation, that will stress me out. If things go wrong with other aspects of my life, that will stress me out. So it's not to say that I'm only focusing on, oh no, have I upset my partner because of my Ugg boots or what have you, but that's just an example of how my anxiety can affect me and my interactions with people. And that's the thing that I'm most anxious about, and how it affects most is that I overthink things, in particular in relation to my interaction with other people. Like I said, whether warranted or not, it's always heightened, it's always an extreme when I'm in this kind of state of mind. Which leads me into infertility and IVF. So I have blocked fallopian tubes. There is like a 1% chance, less than a 1% chance, that my partner and I could fertilize an egg and it could become a baby without intervention. We started trying to have a baby in 2017. I am not going to go into a huge amount of detail about all these things because they're in those videos, so if you want to know more specific information, that's where to go and find them. But we started trying in 2017. I fell pregnant in 2018, but it was an ectopic pregnancy. So what that means, for those that don't know, an ectopic pregnancy is when you have an embryo and it has implanted somewhere outside of the uterus. So the uterus is designed to stretch and grow as the baby stretches and grows. Other parts of the body, other parts of the reproductive system, like the fallopian tubes, are not designed to do that stretching. It's most common for an ectopic pregnancy to embed in a fallopian tube. In my case, they didn't actually know where it was. They could never actually find it. They only knew I was pregnant because of hormone levels rising, which is one of the ways they know in the early stages. It's what happens when you get a positive pregnancy test. Anyway, so it's extremely dangerous for a pregnancy to implant in a place that is not a uterus because, like I said, nowhere else is designed to grow and mold itself around a baby. An embryo would not be viable, it would not become a baby. Eventually it would grow to the point where it would rupture the fallopian tube or wherever it might be, and it could be extremely damaging and potentially life-threatening to the mother, and it would never have become a baby because it was always going to happen like that because it's not somewhere where it's designed to accommodate the growth of a baby or an embryo or a fetus or whatever stage. It would never really get to a baby, it would only ever get to a fetus before that happened. So that happened in 2018, and then that was dealt with. I won't go into details of how that was dealt with, but that was dealt with. And then due to the various things, including the actual procedure that I had to have in order to deal with the ectopic pregnancy, we were trying off and on. We had periods of trying and periods of not trying and so on. So it took probably another year and a half, maybe even 2 years, before we decided that we need to look into something. What's going on here? It doesn't seem like this is happening. We need to look into what's happening. And that's when we discovered I have blocked fallopian tubes. Now, like I said before, it's like 1% or less than 1% chance that we could have sex and have a baby. The sperm's unlikely to get into the fallopian tubes because of the blockage, but even if it does, it's more than likely that that would then be ectopic again. So it's not ideal, even if it were potentially possible for me to fall pregnant without intervention. So we went to a gynecologist, an IVF specialist, and we did all the tests, did all the things you have to do, which is a process that takes time. Eventually, probably not that long, but a few months, we started IVF. There are a number of different versions of IVF that you can do with all the tests that we did and all the info that was gathered and etc. My age, all those things. The decision that was made was that we would do stimulated IVF. So what that means is that my ovaries are producing eggs, so we know they can do that. So they inject, or I inject, or my partner injects hormones into my body that stimulate my ovaries to produce eggs, because in a natural cycle, your ovaries produce potentially one egg, but there are multiple follicles that can produce eggs in your ovaries. So if you stimulate the ovaries so that they produce more than one egg, because you want to have lots of eggs because it has to happen outside of the body, and so it's just much easier not to be doing stimulation every time, because stimulation, there are potential side effects, potentially dangerous. Also, it's just not fun. I found that it made me really tired. I felt quite nauseated sometimes, and just kind of generally grumpy. It doesn't do a lot for your mental health in and of itself, getting pumped through with hormones. Anybody who is watching this who has experienced having periods in general and having a menstruation cycle will know that those hormones aren't fun. So this is kind of like amped up because you're being stimulated. You have more hormones than you would naturally or normally. So yeah, that wasn't great fun. So we did the first one and we did okay that round. I think we got maybe 5 or 6 that grew, the follicles that grew. I think they collected 4 eggs, but only 2 of those were, I think 3 were fertilized. But then, so they fertilize them immediately after they collect them, and then they have a period of 5 days before they insert the eggs back into the uterus, the embryos back into the uterus. The reason for that is because in a just people having sex, getting pregnant cycle, it takes 5 days for the embryo to travel from the fallopian tubes down into the uterus and implant. So when they put the embryo back into the uterus, they wait until the time, because your body will expect that and therefore will allow it to come in and potentially will implant it. Now, one of the many things that makes this whole process hard is that you do all of the stimulation, which, like I said before, is difficult for various reasons, not least of all that it messes with your brain and your hormones and makes you feel kind of yucky and grumpy and all those things. But then it still doesn't guarantee anything. So I don't know how many people are like this, but I tended to think of medical intervention as meaning that, well, we do this and then obviously we'll be pregnant, right? So medical intervention means that it's all good. That's not the case. You might not produce eggs. The eggs you produce might not be very good. They might not fertilize. The embryo and the sperm might not work together. They might not last. They are frozen, and then they have that 5 days to grow, no, they're not frozen, sorry, they're in their test tubes. They have those 5 days to grow and develop, and that might not happen. They might not all get to that point. And then they insert one embryo into the uterus, but it still has to implant, and it might not implant. So it really only gets you to the embryo being put in your uterus, and then everything is up to your body. Did that first round, I think, like I said, we ended up 2 viable embryos on day 5. One was inserted, one was frozen. The inserted one didn't take. It didn't embed itself, it didn't become a pregnancy. I think we tried another stimulated cycle a month later, maybe. Same thing. This time there's only 1 viable embryo at the end of everything up to day 5. When they insert that into my uterus. It didn't take. I think that we have done 6 stimulated rounds, so that's quite uncommon, because even if it doesn't do well the first time, normally you wouldn't have more than 1 or 2, maybe 3 stimulated cycles, and usually they get like quite a few eggs, and then from there they can have quite a few embryos and have quite a few frozen embryos. So even if the first embryo doesn't embed, eventually one of the frozen embryos will embed and you'll be pregnant and you'll have a baby, hopefully. So that's the other thing as well that makes everything really hard, is that this medical intervention gets you to day 5. It still needs to implant. Even if it implants, it still could go wrong. You can still have an ectopic. It could still go back up the fallopian tube. But all the things that can potentially go wrong with a pregnancy just in general can still go wrong with an IVF pregnancy. So you can go through all this and have all this done and get a pregnancy, and then it could miscarry, etc. So I think, like I said, we did 6 stimulated rounds, and the doctor suggested, we went along with it, that there wasn't enough yield, as they charmingly put it, enough eggs being produced and collected to make the constant stimulation rounds worthwhile anymore. So we've been doing the IVF side of things for 6 years. Is that right? We're doing the whole thing for 6 years. We've been doing the IVF for 3.5. Feels like 6 years. Feels like 10 years. Feels like 100 years. So anyway, my body is not producing eggs at an amount or a quality that is worth the IVF. So the next option is a donor, an egg donor. We do have someone who has offered to be an egg donor, which is amazing. I just am blown away by the generosity of that person. I think that it's unbelievable. I don't know if I could do it. They have to go through all of the process that I just talked about. They have to get a bunch of tests. They have to do all sorts of things, counselling, all sorts of things. It's not just like giving blood. There's so much that you have to do. So I'm blown away by their generosity and kindness, and just, it's amazing. I honestly am in awe of how amazing this person is. But needing to have an egg donor, it was bad enough when we couldn't just have a baby. It was bad enough when it kept not working. But this is something that's supposed to be natural and normal and everyone can do. And I know that it's always been a thing. You read books and watch movies and hear stories and find out of history about barren women, and it's not a new thing. It's not something that hasn't, doesn't happen to thousands of women, but it's still such an expectation that you will become a mum at some point, and that will just happen. You'll just become a mum. You'll just have a baby. Get married, you have a baby, la la la. To find out that you're not even capable of producing the egg that is required, much less have it be fertilized, grow, implanted, blah blah blah, is just, it's really hard. It really sucks. It feels like you're broken, there's something wrong with you, you're not a real person somehow. So that knowledge has been really hard. We started the process of trying to find a donor, and then finding a donor, and then all of the things they have to do 18 months ago, and every step has taken longer for various reasons than I anticipated. And this process is, even though I knew all the stuff that would have to happen, this process is bigger and more time consuming and more involved than I anticipated. And like I said, it's taken longer than I anticipated, and that hurts. that is hard. And I feel like it isn't just we've been trying for 6 months, we've been trying for a year, and we're getting upset and it's not working. It isn't like it's compounded. So there's that, and then there's all the IVF that didn't work, and all the money that's been spent, and all the effort that's gone into it. And every time anyone that's tried to have children, no matter how long it took, no matter how much intervention you had, anyone that's tried to have children will know the feeling of wanting that thing to happen and then finding out it didn't work. That's the only feeling I've had. And every new thing that I think this is it, it's going to work. It'll work this time, it doesn't work. And it's getting further and further away because it's becoming less something I can do, and the options are getting smaller. It's really hard. And that is not any shade on the person, the egg donor. They haven't done anything wrong or anything, that they're not to blame for time or energy or anything. It's just I had unrealistic expectations, and it's just been a longer process, and I'm feeling super stressed about it. And that's because of that compounded, the first, second, third, 10th time that you got your period, or found out, however you found out that you weren't going to have a baby, is compounded by how many years and how many interventions and how many times we've been told that, this will do this and this is hopefully what will happen. The main reason why my mental health is really not very good at the moment is because of that compounded wanting something and doing all this to get it and just not achieving it, and it feeling like it's my fault, and feeling like I am doing something wrong, I am broken, I am causing this thing to happen. And it's not just me that's affected, it's my partner as well, and he wants this, and this is a process that he has to go on, but he also looks after me and cares for me. And so there's guilt there, there's a lot of guilt there, and not just about, I'm broken and I can't achieve this, but putting him through it all the time and being sad about it all the time and being stressed about it all the time, and it's always in the back of my mind. Even if it's way in the back, it's still there. So that's where that is. We are working towards egg donorship. That's the IVF. That's the biggest thing that affects my mental health, but it does mean that other things that happen on top of it, and then on top of all of that is the fact that I just have generalized anxiety in general. It's hard. Another thing that has been causing us some stress recently, and realistically for probably the last 5 months, but again in particular recently, is our cat Pistachio. We have 3 fur babies, Peanut, Pistachio and Shade. In March of this year, Pistachio was really, really sick. She couldn't really do anything. She was just hiding under the bed and moving incredibly slowly, and would just come out to go to the toilet and eat or have a drink of water. All of those things being very unlike her. So we took her to the vet, to the after hours vet actually. It was on a weekend. And they did a bunch of tests and asked a bunch of questions and etc. And it turns out that she has diabetes. Now, diabetes is treatable. We have to give her insulin twice a day, so every 12 hours. But she responded really well to the treatment. She was in hospital for about 5 days. She responded really, really well to the treatment, and they sent her home early because they said, look, the worst thing at the moment is that she's just wants to be at home. So we brought her home, but she still wasn't 100%, and then we had to start doing the injections. That was pretty stressful at the time because my partner was going to Melbourne like the day that we brought the cat home, and so I had to start this process myself, which was very stressful. I was very anxious about that, mostly because I'd never done it before. Well, I had injected actually myself with IVF, but you know, I hadn't injected a cat before. Fortunately, you can get the little sensors that you input into the skin, and then it's Bluetoothed, or it has Bluetooth in it, so you have an app on your phone, you can scan it to see how her blood sugar is going. Because honestly, I don't think we could do a pinprick test on a cat, like, just how. Anyway, she got heaps better, she was doing really well, but then just recently, in the last couple of weeks, she has started going downhill a little bit. Her blood sugar is always high at the moment. She's struggled to get an accurate amount of insulin to help her, so she's had to kind of put it down, put it up, put it down, put it up. So it's gone up quite a bit at the moment, and yesterday she was really not her normal self. She seems to be a little bit brighter and more cheerful today, but she's just generally not 100%, so that's upsetting and stressful. We're worried about her, and like I said, it's on top of all the other things. I mean, we'd be worried about our baby regardless, but I feel like everything else that I'm talking about is kind of on top of the IVF. That just makes everything harder in a way. So we're worried about Pistachio. And then in June, my grandmother passed away. I was pretty close to my grandma. She was in her early 90s, and she had a pretty amazing life, you know, a long life. She travelled, she was a teacher, she had 3 kids, a bunch of grandkids, she was close to her family, like, she did a lot of stuff, and I know she was happy with her life. I also know that she was kind of wanting to die, basically. She wanted to pass for a while before she did. It's sad, but in a way it's less sad than it could be, but it was still sad, and I miss her. We used to do a bunch of stuff. I used to take her out for lunch and things, but I used to go in probably less frequently than I should have or potentially wanted to, but I used to go in probably once a fortnight maybe and read to her. She couldn't read. She had really bad headaches, so she couldn't concentrate and read, but I would go in and read to her. I read Emma to her, and I was reading Rebecca, and that was a thing that I know she was really, really enjoying, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I was pretty close with my grandma. We travelled together. We went to England and the States together in sometime 2020, and you know, that was great. That was a really good time. So yeah, I miss her. I can see where she used to live. She lived in a home, and the last bit of her life, I can see it out my window, like literally now. So it's kind of hard to look out the window so often throughout the day and miss grandma. So that definitely has made me sad and has also affected my general mental health levels. Again, the compounded nature of everything. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about is my channel. Now, it's not anything near as important as any of these things that I've been talking about, and without all of those other things, it probably wouldn't be a factor, or it'd be a small factor. But I don't feel like my channel is doing particularly well at the moment, certainly not from YouTube's perspective. I've lost quite a few subscribers recently. My videos aren't getting as many views as they were. I don't really know why. I know there's a certain amount of we won't ever know why. It's the algorithm. You know, there's only so much you can do about that. I don't really understand how that all works anyway. So that definitely, you know, is a factor. I don't think my videos are being publicised a lot, and that's just bumming me out. Like I said, it wouldn't bum me out a little bit, but it wouldn't make me feel really bad under normal circumstances. But again, the compound nature is it's kind of upsetting me a bit. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. That's what's going on for me. Like I said, I kind of just wanted people to know, so I guess now you know. I don't kind of think I have anything else to really talk about. I'll just double check. Anyone that is here that hasn't been here before, that is interested in mostly bookish content, obviously I'd love that if you would subscribe. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you got something out of the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did, and I'll talk to you soon.